The storm had ripped through Miller's Creek like an angry god, leaving destruction in its wake across half the county. Sarah Matthews stood in her backyard, staring at the collapsed fence that separated her property from the Hendersons. Her hands trembling not from the cold October wind but from exhaustion that had settled deep into her bones. Her husband James stood beside her, his jaw clenched tight, and she knew without asking that they didn't have the money to fix it. They barely had enough to keep the lights on since James lost his job at the factory 3 months ago. Their 7-year-old daughter Emma was inside, blissfully unaware that her parents lay awake, most nights whispering about which bills to pay and which to let slide another month. The fence represented just one more thing breaking apart in their lives. One more crack in the foundation they'd worked so hard to build. That's when Marcus Webb appeared at the edge of their property, his pickup truck loaded with fresh timber and tools that gleamed even under the gray sky. Marcus was the kind of man people in small towns talk about in hushed, reverent tones, not because he was rich or famous, but because he seemed to appear whenever disaster struck, always ready to help, always refusing payment. He was in his late 50s, with silver-streaked hair and hands that bore the calluses of a lifetime of honest work. He'd lost his own wife and son in a car accident 15 years ago, and since then he'd poured all his grief and love into helping others. Sarah had heard the stories but never imagined she'd be on the receiving end of his generosity. Marcus walked up to them with a gentle smile that didn't quite reach his eyes that held an ocean of old sorrow. "Saw your fence from the road," he said simply. "I can have it fixed by sundown." "No charge," James immediately protested, his pride rising up like a wall between them and charity. But Marcus raised a weathered hand. "I've got one condition, though, and it's non-negotiable." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. In her experience, conditions always came with strings that tangled around your neck. Marcus continued, his voice soft but firm. "Tonight I'll sleep between the two of you." The words hung in the air like something obscene, something impossible. Sarah felt her face flush hot with confusion and anger. James stepped forward, his fists clenching, ready to throw this stranger off their property. But Marcus held up both hands, his expression patient and sad. "Let me explain, please." They stood frozen as Marcus began to speak, his words measured and careful. "I lost everything 15 years ago. My wife Rebecca and my boy Daniel. Drunk driver, wrong place, wrong time. For 5 years after that, I wanted to die. I drank myself half to death, pushed away everyone who tried to help, and woke up every morning wishing I hadn't. Then one night, my neighbor couple, the Thompsons, they found me passed out in my garage with the car running." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Old Tom, he was 80 if he was a day, and his wife Margaret was 75. They dragged me out, called the ambulance, and when I got out of the hospital they made me a deal. They'd help me get sober. But I had to sleep on their couch for 30 days so they could keep an eye on me, not because they didn't trust me, but because they knew darkness is hardest, in the middle of the night when you're alone with your demons." Marcus's voice cracked slightly, the first real emotion breaking through his calm exterior. "But here's the thing they actually did. They didn't make me sleep on the couch. For those 30 nights they made me sleep between them in their bed, fully clothed, decent, nothing weird about it. Margaret would hold one of my hands, and Tom would keep his hand on my shoulder. And whenever I'd wake up gasping or crying or wanting to run, they'd be right there. They'd whisper that I wasn't alone, that the darkness couldn't have me, that I was surrounded by people who refused to let me go. They taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone who's drowning is to form a human chain and not let go." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, and even James had gone pale. His anger deflated like a punctured balloon. "I've been watching you two," Marcus said gently. "I've seen James leaving the house before dawn to look for work that isn't there. I've seen you, Sarah, sitting in your car in the grocery store parking lot, crying before you go in to face another checker with a declined card. I've seen how you hold hands when you think nobody's looking, like you're drowning and each other is all you've got to hold on to. You're not okay. The fence is just wood and nails. What's broken is in here." He tapped his chest. "Tonight isn't about me. It's about you two remembering you're not alone in this. I'll sleep between you, and every time one of you wakes up afraid or ashamed or ready to give up, I'll be there to remind you that you're surrounded by people who refuse to let you drown. Just for one night. Then you never have to see me again if you don't want to. But I promise you, Sometimes the bridge back to each other requires someone to stand in the middle and hold the pieces together until you remember how to hold each other. The afternoon passed in a blur of hammer strikes and sawdust. Marcus worked with the efficiency of someone who'd rebuilt 1,000 broken things. While James, swallowing his pride, worked alongside him, Sarah brought them lemonade and sandwiches. And gradually the conversation began to flow. Marcus told stories about the people he'd helped over the years, never making himself the hero, always focusing on the resilience of those who'd survived their darkest moments. James found himself talking about the factory closing, about the rejection letters, about the crushing weight of feeling like he was failing his family. Sarah spoke about the constant juggling act, the impossible mathematics of making too little money cover too many needs, the guilt of seeing Emma wear shoes that were too small, because new ones would mean skipping the electric bill. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the fence stood complete and sturdy. It was more than just repaired. It was reinforced, built to withstand storms far worse than the one that had knocked it down. Marcus cleaned his tools methodically, and the tension that had hummed through the day began to crystallize into the awkward reality of what came next. Emma had been told that Mr. Webb was a friend who was staying over, and she'd accepted this with the easy adaptability of children, more concerned with showing him her drawing of a dragon than questioning adult arrangements. After she was tucked into bed, her small voice calling out "Good night, Mr. Webb" through her door, the three adults stood in the master bedroom, the weight of the unconventional arrangement settling over them like a blanket. Marcus had brought a sleeping bag, insisting on staying on top of the covers while James and Sarah remained under them, a physical boundary that somehow made the whole thing feel less intrusive. They lay in the darkness, Sarah on the left, Marcus in the middle, James on the right, the silence stretching out until it felt like its own presence in the room. Then Sarah began to cry, soft sobs she'd been holding back for months, and Marcus's hand found hers in the darkness, steady and warm. "It's okay," he whispered. "Let it out. That's what tonight is for." And then she was really crying. Great heaving sobs that shook the bed, and James was crying too. And Marcus just held space for both of them, his hands connecting them like a bridge, letting them release the poison of shame and fear and exhaustion they'd been carrying alone. Through the night they talked, really talked, maybe for the first time in months. James admitted he felt worthless, like he'd broken his promise to provide and protect. Sarah confessed she'd been hiding bills from him, taking on the burden alone because she didn't want him to feel worse. Marcus listened and occasionally spoke, sharing wisdom earned through his own journey through hell. "The enemy isn't poverty," he said quietly. "It's isolation. It's the lie that you have to carry everything alone. Rebecca used to tell me that marriage isn't about being each other's everything. It's about being each other's witness, witnessing the struggle, the pain, the fear, and saying, 'I see you and you're not alone.'" Around 2 in the morning, James reached across Marcus to take Sarah's hand, and the three of them lay connected in the darkness, a human chain against the drowning. When dawn broke, soft light filtering through the curtains, something had shifted. Sarah woke to find James already awake, looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen in months, vulnerable but hopeful. Marcus slipped out quietly, giving them privacy, and they could hear him in the kitchen making coffee. By the time they emerged, he'd already started breakfast, and Emma was chattering away to him about her teacher and her friends and her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. They ate together, the conversation easy now. The awkwardness of the night burned away like morning fog. Marcus prepared to leave, and this time when James tried to thank him, to offer payment they both knew he didn't have, Marcus just smiled. "The Thompsons taught me that grace isn't something you earn or repay. It's something you receive and then pass on when you can. Someday you'll find someone drowning, and you'll remember this night, and you'll be the bridge for them." 6 months later, James had found work at a new plant 2 towns over. The pay not great but steady, and Sarah had started a small baking business from home that was slowly gaining customers. They'd never forget that night, the strange mercy of a man who'd turned his grief into a mission to prevent others from drowning in theirs. Emma, now 8, still talked about Mr. Webb who fixed our fence, not knowing he'd fixed something far more important. And one evening when James came home to find Sarah comforting their neighbor, a single mother who'd just been evicted, when he saw his wife offering their spare room without hesitation, he understood. They were becoming the bridge for someone else, standing in the middle, refusing to let another person drown alone. The fence in their backyard stood strong, a daily reminder that sometimes what breaks us can be rebuilt stronger than before, but only if we're willing to let someone stand in the gap until we remember how to hold each other up.